Most conversations in church about porn go one of two ways, either silence or shame. Either nobody talks about it at all, or the second it comes up, the whole room changes. Suddenly it's whispers and panic and accountability apps and sermons that make you feel like God's hiding in the ceiling tiles watching you jerk it. And if we're honest, neither approach seems to actually help anyone change. The silence hasn't made it disappear, and the shame mostly just teaches people how to hide better. So I want to try to talk about this differently. And I'm not here to give you a purity lecture. I'm not here to act like this is the unforgivable sin. And I'm not going to ask the usual institutional question, will this send you to hell? I think there's a more honest question. What is this actually doing to you? Because porn doesn't break a rule. It reshapes how you see people, how you experience intimacy, and how you deal with loneliness, what your brain starts craving, and what kind of relationships feel normal. Even what love itself begins to feel like. And I think that matters, not just spiritually, but humanly, because whether you're religious or not, what you repeatedly consume shapes you. And pornography is not neutral. Before we go anywhere else, we need to talk honestly about why people turn to pornography in the first place. Christians often talk about porn as though people only use it because they're depraved or they're evil. But most people's story isn't, I woke up one morning desperate to become addicted to artificial intimacy. Usually it starts much smaller. Curiosity, puberty, loneliness, stress, rejection, boredom, escape. And now we live in a world where temptation has push notifications. You don't even really have to go looking for porn anymore. It's woven into the architecture of modern life. Algorithms learn what holds your attention. Social media constantly pushes sexual imagery. Loneliness is everywhere. And in the middle of all that, your phone offers instant distraction from being human for just a few minutes. And I think for many people, porn isn't mainly about lust. It can be about comfort, or numbness, or control, or escape. It's what you turn to late at night when your head is wrecked and you don't want to think anymore. It's anesthesia. And that matters, because if we reduce this whole thing down to you just need to want sex less, we completely misunderstand the problem. A lot of people aren't chasing pleasure nearly as much as they're trying to escape pain. And that's why shame alone doesn't work. Because shame can't heal loneliness. It can't heal anxiety. It can't heal rejection. In fact, for a lot of people, shame becomes part of the cycle. You feel alone, you use porn, and you feel disgusted at yourself afterwards. So you isolate more, which makes you lonelier, which makes the escape more tempting the next time. And round it goes. Not because you're uniquely evil, but because humans are deeply formable creatures. We become what we repeatedly practice. And that's really what this conversation is about. Formation. I want to use that word intentionally. Not just sin, not just addiction, but formation. Because formation is about what you are becoming over time. The slow cumulative effect of what you repeatedly do, watch, crave, fantasize about, and normalize. And porn forms people. Not metaphorically, but literally. The brain adapts to what you feed it. There's an old neuroscience phrase that neurons that fire together wire together. Habits crave pathways, and modern pornography is unlike anything human beings have ever had access to before. An ancient human weakness has been supercharged by algorithms designed to keep you clicking. Infinite novelty, infinite escalation, infinite stimulation. The brain acclimates to stimulus. What shocked you 6 months ago no longer hits the same way, so you look for something slightly different, slightly more intense, and slightly more extreme. Not always dramatically, sometimes quietly, but over time your desires begin adapting around the system that feeds it. And so eventually, real relationships can start feeling slower, harder, less stimulating, because real intimacy requires things that porn doesn't. Patience, vulnerability, awkwardness, mutuality, responsibility, being truly known by the other person. Porn offers intimacy without vulnerability, pleasure without responsibility, connection without the risk of rejection. And if you repeatedly train your nervous system around that pattern, well, it starts shaping how you understand intimacy. Not necessarily overnight, and not in some cartoonish way, but gradually it walks. And you don't walk away from porn one day suddenly incapable of loving people, but I do think it quietly trains the eyes over time. People become categories. Bodies become content. Human beings become experiences. And that leaks into real life more than we often admit. Into dating, into marriage, into attention spans, into expectations, into how we look at strangers, into how difficult ordinary human connection can start to feel compared to the frictionless fantasy on the screen. I honestly think one of the greatest crises of modern life is that we are losing the ability to sit inside real intimacy without constant novelty. Everything has become consumption, even people. And then there's the isolation, because porn is strange, right? It imitates intimacy while often deepening loneliness. It gives you the biological sensation of closeness while pulling many people further away from actual connection. And the secrecy compounds that. Porn almost always lives in secret, which means shame grows in the dark around it. You hide it so that nobody can help. And because nobody can help, the cycle deepens. Use, shame, hide, repeat. And the terrifying thing is that after enough repetition, the cycle can start feeling normal. Like this is just who you are now. But I don't think that's true. I think habits shape us deeply, but I don't think they have to define us permanently. Now I want to shift the perspective for a minute, because so far we've mainly talked about the consumer. But there are other people involved in this conversation, real people. And I think modern internet culture trains us to forget that. The screen functions like a kind of ideological shield. It turns human beings into content. It sanitizes the transaction. It makes it feel like you're just watching something rather than participating in something. But behind the screen are actual lives. And many people who enter the porn industry do so through vulnerability, financial desperation, coercion, trauma, addiction, manipulation, broken backgrounds that left them without better options, or without the ability to recognize a bad option when they saw one. Not always, but often enough that we should care. And I know that some of you are thinking, what about the people who choose it freely? Things like OnlyFans. What about the ones who say that they're empowered by it? Who built a brand, who control their content, who insist that they have no regrets? I think we have to take that seriously. I'm not going to stand here and tell every person in that industry that they're lying about their own experience. But I do want to push back on something. Because consent and exploitation, they're not opposites. A system can be exploitative, even when the individuals within it feel free. Think about it this way. If someone grows up in a culture that has told them that their body is the most valuable asset, that their worth is tied to their desirability, and then they enter an industry built on that premise entirely, then they feel empowered doing it. Of course, but is that freedom? Or is that a person who has been shaped by an exploitative system so thoroughly that the exploitation feels like liberation. I'm not saying that to be cruel. I'm saying it because I think it's an honest question. The porn industry doesn't just consume bodies. It consumes people's understanding of themselves, and it offers a version of value, visibility, money, attention, followers, and that can genuinely feel like power, especially to someone who has never been given a different kind. And then there's the machine itself, because even if we set aside every individual story and every question of personal consent, the industrial logic of pornography is inherently escalatory. Engagement drives revenue, novelty drives engagement, and escalation drives novelty. The machine always wants more extreme content, always. Not because the people running it are necessarily monsters, but because that's what the economics demand, and the people inside that industry feel the pressure constantly to go further, to do more, to give the algorithm what it wants. And algorithms, they don't care about the well-being of the people feeding them. That's not liberation. That's just a different kind of a trap with a better marketing campaign. And here's the part that implicates the consumer directly. Demand is not passive. Every view shapes what gets made. Every click funds the next production. Every consumer is a participant in the system, not just a bystander watching from the outside. Christianity has always insisted that our private choices ripple outward. And there is no truly victimless actions. That we are connected to each other whether we like it or not. This is one of the clearest examples of that truth in modern life. When you watch, you're not just consuming an image. You're casting a vote for what gets made next. You're part of the demand that shapes the supply. And the supply has real human beings in it. That brings us to the spiritual side of this. And honestly, I think the church has often communicated this part poorly. A lot of Christians talk as though God hates porn because God hates pleasure. As though Christianity's message is bodies bad, desire bad, sex bad. But that's not actually the biblical story. The Bible's version of intimacy is much deeper than rules. It's about meaning. The Christian claim is that human beings are made in the image of God. The imageo Dei. Every person you lock eyes with carries inherent dignity. Pornography pushes against that version because it reduces a person into consumption. It turns image bearers into products. And listen carefully. Desire itself is not evil. The problem isn't that humans long for intimacy, pleasure, closeness, affection, beauty, or connection. Those desires are deeply human. They're God-given. But desire can be shaped, formed, distorted, or deepened. What you repeatedly give yourself to changes what you hunger for. And I think porn often takes something profoundly meaningful and hollows it out. Because intimacy was never supposed to just be stimulation. It was supposed to involve being known, being chosen, being vulnerable, and being safe. Porn simulates intimacy while removing almost everything that gives intimacy meaning. No mutuality, no covenant, no responsibility, no genuine knowing, just consumption. And I don't think God opposes porn because he's trying to withhold joy from people. I think God opposes anything that empties people of their dignity and empties intimacy of its meaning. That's a very different conversation. So what do you actually do with all of this? Because I don't want this ending with try harder. Most people struggling with porn have already tried harder. Bring it into the light. Not performative church confession, not public humiliation. I mean, one honest conversation with somebody safe. A trusted friend, a mentor, or a counselor. A pastor who actually understands grace. Because secrecy gives shame oxygen. And the second something stops living entirely in darkness, its power starts weakening. Second, understand your triggers. When does it usually happen? Loneliness, stress, boredom, rejection? Late at night? After scrolling endlessly online? Don't just treat it like random temptation appearing out of nowhere. Become curious about your own patterns. Because if porn has become emotional anesthesia, you need to understand the pain underneath it. Third, build something better. And this part is hard because it's slower. Real relationships are harder than fantasy. Real intimacy is slower than instant gratification. Real vulnerability is terrifying. But real life exists there too. You can't build a meaningful life entirely around avoidance. Eventually you need connection, purpose, friendship, discipline, community, meaning, not just don't click things. And finally, hold grace and honesty together. Because Christians tend to split those apart. Either it's no big deal or you're disgusting. Neither of those are true. This does not make you worthless. It doesn't place you beyond grace. It doesn't make God incapable of loving you. But I also think pretending that it doesn't matter is dishonest, because habits shape people over years. And deep down, I think many people already know that. Not because somebody screamed it at them from a pulpit or from a stage, but because they felt it. The numbness, the distance, the fragmentation, the inability to connect deeply, and the loneliness. And I think maturity begins when we stop asking only, what am I allowed to do? And start asking, what kind of person is this shaping me into? Because in the end, you're not just fighting a habit. You're choosing, slowly, quietly, repeatedly, the kind of person that you're becoming. And that person is worth fighting for. My name's Jacob, and this might be church.